Hello everyone, Karl here, and with me is Cross from Campaign Terrain. Hello Charlene and Tina in the chat. How's everyone doing? How are you doing, Cross?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well. You doing good, Karl?
Pretty good, yeah. Just still a bit cold for my hairless head, but not too bad.
Mine's by choice, but yeah, I'm with you on that one.
So, what are you working on today?
Today, I am sorting sawdust so that I can make more flock. I went to the hardware store and picked up 6 big jugs like this of sawdust just from their saw, and that's what I'm doing today. Is sorting foliage, sifting foliage.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I don't think I've got anywhere here where I could go pick up stuff like that. I just I pick up the byproduct from other stuff I try to build. You know, the sensible stuff.
I got you. And I do that too, because I've got a saw in there. I mean, I do woodworking as well, so I do that, but it doesn't generate it in this quantity. So
you do woodworking as well, and LARPing and stuff like that. You build quite a variety of stuff.
Yeah, I build. I prefer natural outdoor terrain, but my videos have been showing, I'm working on a city right now. So.
Yeah, your modular campaign build, yeah.
Yes.
How's that going? So, I mean, the basics were a brilliant idea. The storage units. Hi, Martin.
Yep, and I've got the ground that makes the storage units, and I've also got some houses I'm working on, and I'm designing these so 4 of these will fit on one of those squares, but these, by coincidence, also have storage units as well. because you know me, I found a good idea and I'm running with it. That's one.
It is a good idea. I mean, I think that's one of the most practical piece of terrain I've ever seen.
So what I'm thinking of doing is having most of them like this. My goal is, since these, I don't want them to necessarily be stuck one direction, I'm going to make the top floor have windows on two sides. That way, if I need it on this corner, it's got them on this side. But if I need it on the other corner, I can just turn the top floor and get more windows on that side.
That's really clever. That's and you're going to build them up with bricks same way, and
the bottoms are all going to have the bricks like this.
Okay.
But the or maybe some tiles, but essentially masonry. And all of the upper floors, I'm going to put the wattle and daub texture, the Tudor style or the half timbered. They're all names for essentially the same decor. So these are going to look like medieval English houses.
Okay.
I may also do some that are just adobe looking and change out the tiles on the roof to look like clay tiles.
Nice.
So I can have an entirely different city.
You know, one thing I like about the half timber style is that it's naturally modular. So we've got those divisions between floors and stuff, which makes it easy to do things like that.
Exactly.
So, where did you start out from? Because I think you've been doing this for a really long time now, yeah?
Yes, I started with terrain, with cardboard even back then, but not as nice as I'm doing it now. D&D first started.
So
I had always been one to use like, not quite dollhouse stuff, but even with my action figures, I always like dug places in the ground for them to be for their little bases and things like that for the army men and things. And so when D&D came out, I couldn't just see it as two-dimensional on the ground. I was like, I gotta have rooms. And so I just started. And originally my first piece of terrain I think ever was a high top shoebox, a kind of bigger box with like one door cut in. And that was like the castle throne room for the big bad or something like that. And that was it. I've come a little bit away since then.
I mean, you've picked up quite a lot of skills on the. I mean, I think you're the first person who introduced me to EVA, for example. You have a way with materials. You're not stuck to one particular material like some people are.
Oh no, I'm all over the place. I keep hoping that I'll suddenly have one of those weird experiences where I go back in time and I know everything I know now is like my 15-year-old self or 10-year-old self, because rubber floor mats existed back then. Hot glue guns existed back then. I'm like, I mean, imagine if I had known then what I know now.
with all the time you had when you were a kid, yeah?
Exactly. I'd be the first person. Everybody in the gaming industry would know my name because I would have invented so many building styles. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. I'll tell you that. So we were talking before this about how some of what I've learned and how I put things together, it comes from having been a carpenter for 15 years. And it's amazing how much stuff goes from life size and shrinks down to 1/48 or 1/60th scale. And it's the same method, just tiny.
Yeah, totally.
It's all enjoyable to me to build it because I did this for anyway back in the day, and now I'm just doing it on tiny scale.
I think a lot of.
Oh, and anybody watching who sorts sawdust. I'm only not wearing a mask so Karl can hear me. Wear a mask. This stuff's everywhere.
Yeah, that's probably something I should be doing when I'm doing it myself. So, for some reason, sawdust is one of those things that doesn't strike you as dangerous, but in large quantities, I guess it adds up, yeah?
Yeah, a friend of mine, the black lung you get from working coal mines, a friend of mine calls working with sawdust the brown lung.
Sounds pretty bad.
So how long have you been working on this stuff, Karl?
Uh, I think I started in the 90s. It's mostly Games Workshop stuff, Warhammer and things like that. I used to
I got you.
put
Were you,
together models and things before that, again, cardboard models mostly, but just for the fun of it.
the paper craft,
Yeah,
paper craft
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, I haven't done too much of that. I used to build scale models like airplanes and tanks and whatever with my brothers back even before I did this type of thing, and was actually a wargamer before role playing. I'm old, sorry, it's the truth. I was a wargamer before role playing games were even invented. So, or at least modern style role playing. So but even then, I didn't think to build terrain with it. But as soon as
No,
I started playing role playing games, I was like, no, I gotta have terrain.
it's kind of strange because I mean, terrain is something that, in my head at least, it's more of a wargamer thing, and then
True.
role players just happen to pick it up.
And if I had wargamed with the models I was building, I probably would have. But I was building the models to put on my shelf, and I wargamed with the old Avalon Hill games that were just little paper
Oh,
squares that
okay.
came in a sheet. So it never occurred to me to have terrain with the little cardboard squares.
Okay, so that's old school, old school. The the original ones,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I was back when Avalon Hill was the company, and nobody ever thought they would suffer any things, and then they barely exist anymore. I think they do exclusively video games now.
I think they had some licenses going and stuff like that, but yeah, they did shrink down quite a bit.
So yeah, I went from like toy motorcycles to building things like toy motorcycles, models, to and tanks and all that, and then to wargaming with my brothers, and then to role playing with my brothers, and actually not with my brothers. I role play with my sister. So anybody out there, I know there's all these jerks out there. They go, yeah, fake geek girls, and geek girls don't game and blah. The first people that got me into D&D was a gamer group of 6 girls. So
Okay.
don't listen. So don't listen to that. If any gamer girls are out there listening, we love you and you're awesome. Yes.
Yeah, the hobby is for everyone, absolutely. It's quite surprising because up to quite recently, it was definitely it wasn't just male dominated. It was like literally it's a complete sausage fest. It's unusual to hear of groups of girl gamers going back that far.
And I think at the beginning there were lots of girl gamers, and then just guys were such jerks that they stopped doing it.
Ooh,
Because
okay,
the
that would
first
explain
two
it.
groups I gamed with, the first 2 groups I gamed with, one was my sister and her friends,
Hmm.
and the next one was some friends that I met at high school that I was rolling a die on my tabletop, and a girl walked over and asked me if I knew what that die was for, and I'm like, yeah. And so we ended up having a conversation. I ended up gaming with her and her friends. So yeah,
Nice.
so the first 2 groups I was really in were mostly girls.
Okay, so one of
And if
the
I had only known the glamorous life of sifting sawdust on a Sunday morning,
so on Colin's live stream last week, I recall you had a heated debate with Michael about fantasy fiction. Yeah,
yeah, there you go.
yeah, things got pretty hot for a moment there. So I also noticed that you quite like Michael Moorcock's work.
Oh yeah, he was when by the time most kids got into Narnia
Hmm.
and Lord of the Rings, I had already read the whole Narnia series like twice. I had already read The Hobbit a couple or 3 times, and then had also started to read the Lord of the Rings, and they just didn't hold me the way Michael Moorcock's work did. I found a friend of mine was really into him because his older brother had gotten into him, and I read the Elric series, and from that point I've been hooked. I'm fascinated by not only the depth of the characters in it and their they're not just doing it because you're expected to do it. They have personal reasons for what they're doing. They I was going to go somewhere else with this. Oh, and the fact that all of his stories, he's got like 10 or 12 storylines, total different series of books, but the character in every one of them is the same character. He's supposed to be a reincarnation of the same soul or spirit or whatever, called the Champion Eternal. And I just always found it fascinating. Sometimes he knows, and sometimes he's not even a he, sometimes he's a she. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't know that they're the champion. And they've also got this one person that always seems to assist them, which I've always nicknamed the Sidekick Eternal.
Yeah.
So I've always been fascinated by that recurrence of the same person having to go through similar struggles, but always be like the champion over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But the Elric stuff really caught me because, first off, chaos wasn't even a thing, and Games Workshop didn't even exist when I read those. And the guy that invented Michael Moorcock is the guy who invented the chaos symbol, the 8-pointed star.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually the whole concept of chaos. If you look at, I think 3/4 of the Games Workshop stuff, it's all his work.
It's the same reason. It's the same reason D&D has chaos and law as their things, because Gary had read the Elric series as well. And so I found it fascinating that the entire race of Elric's people had dedicated and devoted themselves to the side of chaos. And he saw that as only bringing strife and unrest. And so he was doing everything he could to be lawful. And it just wasn't working. He kept having to come back to being the same type of person he was before. And he even... I'm wrecking it for anybody who wants to go read this, but he even destabilizes the way his country, his people act, because he thought that it was the wrong way to be. And as you follow him, he begins to learn that his people may serve chaos. He may want to serve law. There may be people that serve law, but in the end, we all serve the balance. And without the balance, it doesn't work. And it's an interesting dichotomy. So, and there's 7 books in that series, and then I think 4 others that come after it that are like sequels, but not really. They're like way later. They're just the same character. And then he's got like 8 other characters that each of them has their own series as well. So it's a lot of books to read, but I find it all fascinating. It all ties back in together.
Yeah, I mean, the Elric Saga in particular is the first one I picked up on. I just found the book in a public library once, and hooked on it. One of the nice things about it is that, for example, there's this whole thing. I mean, chaos and law, and the whole series are not tied to right and wrong or good and evil. They're just opposite extremes, and both of them are necessary.
Yep.
Which it's a lot more nuanced than we have the good guys, we have the bad guys.
And it's not good or bad. It's just chaos is growth and change. Chaos is growth and law is stability.
Yeah.
So, and that's even I have. I took a couple of psychology classes in college, and they even talk about how, from a societal view, there are periods of huge growth, and then it all sort of either balances out or collapses and gets to a certain point, and then everything stagnates for a while. And then there's huge growth, and then everything stagnates for a while. And I could not help but draw correlations on my head to, you have chaos and then law, and then chaos and then law, and you have to have balance in between that. And none of my professors knew what the heck I was talking about, but it made sense.
It does make sense. It is a way of looking at it, but I can understand that Moorcock isn't really cited in academic circles, which is a pity, probably.
Yeah, probably not so much. And he's a fascinating guy. He's an English expat that lives in Texas, which is and I have firmly decided that you should never meet your heroes. So even though I'm from Texas, the people that live like 6 miles from him, I'm not going to go try to track him down. But he looks like he should be a peer to Tolkien. He looks like they should be sitting on a porch sipping tea and smoking their pipes in the front, as the mists rise in the morning. But he writes this outlandish stuff, and he was in a heavy metal band, and he's written lyrics for other bands, and all this different stuff. He's a crazy seeming guy. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the band was called Hawkmoon, I think, after one of the characters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the moon is a recurring theme with him. He's got a character named Moonglum.
Yes, of
course. And then he was in a band called Hawkmoon, and there's something else. There was a third thing. Yeah, so the moon is like a recurring theme with him. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Hawkmoon is. I like metal. I'm not a huge metalhead, but I like metal, and I love Michael Moorcock's writing. And I will tell you right now, Hawkmoon is okay.
He also wrote some songs for the Blue Oyster Cult, if I remember correctly.
Yes, which used to be my favorite band and is still in my top 5 favorite bands of all time. Yeah, he's got two different ones in there. We're gonna bore people talking about Michael Moorcock, but I could go all into the storyline if you want, because one of the things he wrote for Blue Oyster Cult is a song called Black Blade, which is about the rune blade that Elric carries, and there's rune magic built into the blade and all this type of stuff. So yeah, his stuff all ties back in together. Like I said, all his stories go together. Most of the lyrics he writes go together. The songs he sings, etc.
Hi, Stefano.
It's like he's got one unified theme his whole life.
Yeah, I mean, everything. Most of the stuff he writes is about the same multiverse. He goes into it in quite some depth in some places. Martin says, say again, sorry?
I'd love to be that focused, and I am just not.
Martin says, I love the rune stuff, works too. The totemism of Grand Britain military is really fascinating. Yeah, with the rune stuff cycle, one of the things that I really liked was it's not time traveling, it's like when Hawkmoon tries to fix things and then just ends up breaking them more. And then it goes back and fixes them again. It's quite messy.
Yeah, we all have best intentions, and then sometimes it just doesn't. It goes off the rail.
Yeah, one of the things I like about the whole cycle is the magic system.
Yep.
It doesn't really translate well to gaming. But basically, you cannot use it. Even a wizard cannot actually cast any magic themselves. They have to negotiate with an elemental or a demon or something.
Yeah, it's all what would be called summoner magic in
pretty much
old D&D. Yeah, it's all you make pacts and agreements. So there's I'm going to get too deep into it. Yes, it's all, they don't have any power. The only power that they have is by training, exposure, and focusing, they can become more capable of not being drained by the power they borrow. And Elric is actually sort of a weak character physically. He's got an ailment, and he has to take special potions and things so that he can stay as strong as the normal person. And so it all comes down to how well you can balance focusing the power through you by borrowing it to not getting burned out with it. It's a whole balancing act, and it's very interesting. There is a role-playing game based on it, but in my opinion, not very well. The role-playing game is great, but it doesn't seem to follow the book logic very well.
Do you mean the Stormbringer? Wait.
Yep, Stormbringer.
Yeah, 1 second. The thing about it is that...
but to tell you the type of... It's not a feel-good story that I'm talking about. Stormbringer the game, has not the sword. Stormbringer, the game, in the original version, had a table of what happened if you essentially got a nat 1. Like, what happened if you flubbed?
I think it still does.
And one of those, when you mess up, you have to roll to see how badly you mess up on this table. And to tell you how harsh the game is, one of the results could be caster is turned inside out.
Yeah, I think it still has that.
That'll wreck your day.
In the 2001 edition, at least, still has that.
Yep. The newer editions, they had removed that table or edited it, but the original, I think, first 2 editions had that.
Yeah, it's quite different from 5e, for example, from Dungeons and Dragons, because you don't get to be a superpowered hero.
Yeah, there's not as much. If you fail a spell, it just doesn't work. It doesn't backlash and necessarily, kill you. So, a little bit different.
Okay.
Now, as far as systems go, yeah.
Sorry, Martin was saying, I think the magic system is perfect for role-playing. Heavy pen and paper groups. Could never convince my group, though. Kinda. I mean, I tried to run it that way a couple of times, but if people go in with the mindset that they have something like a D&D wizard who can just pick up, okay, I'm going to do this thing and this thing and this thing, they rely too much on the magic system, and you end up wasting half a session on negotiations. I don't know if did you ever try to run something like that, or playing something like that, Ross?
The closest I can think of logically would be the not so much the game, but the novels about Conan, and not just Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer, the ones that people know, but some of the other ones, because it's possible to defeat magic without magic, because you can divert things and you can short things out and things like that. Yep. You can do things to make yourself not susceptible to it. So I think a game that was based on that, and there may be one, I don't know, might be closest to what you're saying.
I guess so, yeah. Dean paints things, putting the rough cut together for my next video. So, what are you working on, Dean?
When you read the stuff off of the comments, I can't hear you when you do it. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I said Dean is putting the rough cut together for his next video, and I asked him what he's working on.
Oh, excellent. What are you working on, Dean?
And Stefano from Chimera War Gaming is putting together a new intro for his channel. Nice.
Yeah, I saw that they both had teasers out today. Dean, I think, had one yesterday, and Stefano had one today. So.
Ooh, I missed those. I have to go back and look for them. So, apart from Moorcock, do you have any other favorite fictions?
Apart from what? I'm sorry?
Apart from Moorcock, do you have any other favorite writers or series or things like that?
Of fantasy series, he's really my favorite, but I will read almost anything. I do have one that several of my friends think are great books, and I can't stand. And to me, they're just porn. There's the gore novels, which my friends swear to me aren't just about sex, but they're just about sex.
Okay.
And so they are, some of them are written by the original guy, and he's a pretty good writer. And a bunch of them are written by other people that either licensed the world or he brought in as secondary writers, and most of them are just not good. So I've got a least favorite set as well.
Okay, let's hear that.
Well, that's what I was talking was the gore novels, the GOR gore novels. But like I said, they're all porn stuff, and I find that most of the people that are like really into that, I'm like, wow, you're creepy.
Yeah, it sounds weird. It's like 50 Shades of Grey for sci-fi or stuff like that.
Exactly. Speaking of what could have gone down the same route but didn't, I do like Burroughs, who wrote John Carter of Mars.
Yeah.
I wish the Disney movie had done better. I wish they had hyped it at all. I was really hoping they'd make a whole bunch more of those, but they did kind of flub it on that movie. So he's pretty good. I, of course, like Jules Verne, and he's sort of Michael Moorcock. A lot of people draw their inspiration from him, but he drew some of his inspiration from Jules Verne before him, because Jules Verne was very steampunk well before that was even a thing, because he had the Nautilus of Captain Nemo and all that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, most of his science fiction is what we call steampunk today at this point.
Exactly. And you can see the inspiration taken from that in Michael Moorcock's stuff about the Von Beck family, because they ride around in airships and stuff, and it's very steampunky as well before steampunk was a thing. And I think that he took a lot of his inspiration from Jules Verne.
Okay, Cross, you seem to be frozen. We can hear you, but
what?
Frozen. We can hear you, but you're not moving.
Let me go fix that.
So yeah, I didn't think about that. I mean, the inspiration from Jules Verne, I don't think I noticed that very much in his books. Okay, we have movement.
No, I was secretly just sitting really still.
But
yeah, Jules Verne specifically, the one I'm thinking of is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea with the Nautilus submarine, because that book is the way the Nautilus is described in the book is very steampunk.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of the earliest examples of that genre. Martin asked, wait, there was a Disney John Carter movie? Sadly, yes, there was a Disney John Carter movie.
Yeah, I even like it, but I can see absolutely why people don't. It was called just John Carter. It shouldn't. It was based on the first novel, so it should have been called Princess of Mars. And it wasn't even like the whole book. It was like 2/3 of the book. And it was not horrible, but it was not great.
Yeah, I mean, it just wasn't enough to keep the franchise going.
Yeah, no, not even close. And they did absolutely nothing to hype it. I literally didn't see a commercial for it until after it was already out. And it didn't do anything to tell about it. It was basically like, yeah, showed people jumping around fighting and then said, yep, John Carter. Yep, that's out.
Yay.
Yep. And that was about it. And I was very disappointed in their lack of marketing. And you can't tell me that Disney can't market, because I hate Star Wars and I'm watching 2 Star Wars shows right now. So their marketing can be really good. I don't hate Star Wars. I just got really bored with it after about 19 movies. But I am enjoying The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. So
okay, I haven't watched all of The Mandalorian yet, and I haven't watched any of Boba Fett yet.
Before I go offending anybody saying I hate anything, okay? I want to be very clear.
Like you hate Lord of the Rings and things?
I never said I hate anything. I actually don't hate Lord of the Rings. I just have other things I like better. There's some more modern settings where they go very specifically into how the magic and stuff like that works, since you're asking, and it just occurred to me. So there's some things that are set in medieval era, and there's some things that are set in the modern era that I both like by 2 different authors. The stuff I like in the medieval type era is there's a book called Nightfall, or The Legend of Nightfall, by Guy Gavriel K. It's probably Guy Gavriel K. He's probably French. I don't know. And there's a whole series of books by a writer named Gail, Gael Baudino. Gail Baudino.
Okay.
And those are very good. And those are set in a modern world with elves that can become addicted to like caffeine and chocolate and aren't allowed and can aluminum because they can't touch steel. Yeah, so there's some very interesting stuff out there. So
Yeah, I've been reading the Dresden Files recently by Jim Butcher, which is basically about a wizard working as a private investigator in Chicago.
and it's really strange. I found out in the last couple or 3 years that I've got like 20 friends that are super into that series. And I don't, when it was first coming out, I didn't know anybody who was into it. I didn't even know it really existed until he was already like 20 books deep.
It's really enjoyable. I mean, it's fairly lowbrow, but definitely enjoyable. And same thing, you've got things like bribing fairies with pizzas and things like that.
I got you. Oh, and while we're talking about it, since I already mentioned Conan, I forgot that the Conan series was always enjoyable to me. I always liked that, even the ones that weren't written by him.
Yeah,
like 'em.
I think I've got some of the what do you call them? Conan stories written by Robert Jordan, I think, in a compendium. That was pretty good as well.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the originals are gold standard. And I think again there are a few writers from the 50s and I think pre-World War One as well, which you do find sometimes, but they're really not well known.
I froze up again, I think.
Yeah, you seem to be frozen.
All right. I'll fix that in just a second. Let me get the sawdust off my hands. My phone also keeps making noise when it's supposed to be on silent. So, you know. Yeah, get into crafting, kids. You too can enjoy the highbrow life of sifting sawdust and adjusting technology.
Come on, it's like one of those Tibetan monk things. It's like, yeah, sift the sawdust, sift the sawdust, sift the sawdust. It's very zen.
Exactly.
Speaking of, you've used quite a lot of materials for making flock as well, yeah? I mean, tea and spices?
I use tea, spices, and I use them for different things. Like this
Uh-huh.
will mostly be on trees or moss. The
Okay.
spices, since they're bigger and I don't like to grind them up in the grinder, those tend to be like litter fall in under trees in
Okay.
like woods and things. So I put those like at the base of trees. And what'd you say? Tea, spices, yeah. And the tea is similar to similar to the sawdust. It's tends to be smaller than the spices, so I don't
Mhm.
really use it for that. But I use it for like I do the sawdust. But tea is already so much darker than sawdust. I can add the same color paint in the same ratios, and it I don't use ratios. I can squirt in about the same amount into the bowl, and it comes out way darker. And I've gotten used to knowing how much darker the tea is than the sawdust. So if I want a nice woodland scene where, you know, it's your basic woods and they're just going, you know, walking through the woods and might get attacked by, you know, kobolds or whatever, that's going to be sawdust and such. If I'm wanting something dark and sinister, or it's supposed to be like a blighted land, I tend to use the tea for that because it makes a much, much darker flock. I also use tea for things like moss inside caves.
Okay, so use them literally for different scenes rather than different functions.
Yeah, just because the base coloring of the material itself affects the way it looks after I add paint.
Nice. I think the first videos I saw on your channel were the desert terrain, actually.
Yeah, the desert terrain I like. I need to add more foliage to that, but I don't really. Problem is, I grew up in Arizona, and I know what desert terrain looks like to me, and I don't know how to make the plants. The plants are all either like succulents and big bulb things that hold water, or they're tiny skinny things like Alcatel and that was a horrible pronunciation. Ocotillo and my brain just shut off. Palo Verde, and those are really wiry so that they retain moisture rather than trying to keep it in bulk. That's so they bleed out less, so they need less, and so they work different ways. And I have not found a way to replicate either of those to a way that looks good in scale. I can kind of make good cactuses with either air dry clay or polymer clay, and then toothpicks for the spines. But for the stick-like trees, the thin trees, if you use wire, it just ends up looking like a wire. It doesn't end up looking like the tree. One of these days, I'll figure out how to do that. So I don't make as much desert foliage as I would like. People think the desert has no foliage. I'm like, there's a lot of foliage in the desert. It's just different.
Speaking of wire trees, 1 second. Let's see if I can reach my stuff.
I froze up again.
No, you're still moving. Okay, I don't know if it's any visible.
Oh, there I am. Okay, there I go. All right.
Okay, Cross. I don't know how visible these are, but these are wire trees, basically.
Right. But Ocotillo, in scale, are much, much, much thinner. Ocotillo are like the size of my pinky, with a million little spines sticking out of them. And it's if you did it, it would literally just be wire, no clay on it, no nothing.
Yeah, I mean, if it's that thin, it wouldn't really. Although, I mean, like you could maybe use something like copper wire, maybe from the. It wouldn't be very strong, though.
Right, but they do have tiny little leaves and spines on them, and I can't figure out how to make that part.
I don't know, maybe. So, I don't know if someone. Say again, sorry?
I said I've been playing around with it. I'll figure it out one of these days.
Or maybe, I don't know, if anyone in the chat maybe has some ideas or done it before or seen it, then maybe you can point us in the right direction. Martin says that toothpicks as spikes is really old school Warhammer 40k terrain. Yes, Warhammer 40k is all about spiky stuff. But yeah, I think since you mentioned that that's the kind of terrain you grew up in, I think it's even worse for you because you're like, I know how this looks like in reality, and it's not quite there yet. It's probably going to be even pickier than someone who didn't grow up in the area, or someone who's not really exposed to that kind of vegetation.
And I've been crafting for 35 years, and I still can't get past the point that it should look good in your hand, not just at 3 foot fabulous. And I just can't seem to do that.
Do you have a favorite craft from the things you've done? Because I mean, 35 years is a very long time. Do you have any favorites?
The favorite thing I've ever made doesn't exist anymore. It was 20 years ago, but it was, I had used the basic normal everyday packing foam, the white stuff with those little beads, and I had cut smaller and smaller concentric rings and I had done them just right so that it not only made a funnel at the bottom, but that each one was cut in a little more, so it made like an amphitheater and had a little dais in the middle. And I had used it for a bunch of things. We used it for where the bad guys were having their were dissecting people, cutting people open to, devote to the gods. And we used it for amphitheaters for when the Elven King was giving his speech that we had to go, we had to go listen to, and then we did all that. But it just turned out really well. The stonework turned out really well. And I remember that I used sand and PVA for the texture and just spread it on and painted it with, and there wasn't anything, I didn't think of mossing it or anything, but I had put like at the corners of it started off on a square board with a round hole in it. And it wasn't just that it went straight down, it's that each layer made a dish, and it had 4 pillars on it, which I wanted to make it look like it was set between parts of a mountain or whichever. And it just turned out really well. I just really liked it. Now I would have painted it a little different to give it a little less gray color to the rock, and I would have added some moss and vines. But other than that, I probably wouldn't really change it. And I may have to make another one of those, because that was really my favorite. It turned out exactly like I pictured it in my head, and we used it for like 10 different things. It ended up not being like a one-use thing. So it worked out just really well. And it wasn't tough to build, like a 2-day build.
Yeah, I mean, that thing when you get something that actually matches the picture in your head, that's it's pretty rare, but I love that feeling.
Yep. When you get done with it and you're like, that is exactly what I wanted. Yep, that's good. Now, on the other hand, I like the opposite of that as well, because the city blocks I was building, I wasn't picturing those looking like that. I was picturing to be smaller, so they'd be like about 2 inches tall, and I could build some little steps up to them. And by the time I started doing it, and I started making them with pizza boxes in the DM Scotty style of cutting cylinders of toilet paper to the right length, putting those inside, filling them with paper so they wouldn't collapse, and like gluing the whole thing together to make platforms. And I got 4 of those platforms built and just really wasn't liking the look. And it occurred to me I could make a box out of cardboard is what I started with, and then realized I could also do it with foam core just as easily. And once I made that box, I realized, well, that's more rigid than the other thing was. I wonder if I could make this so it'll open, and was going to make the storage on it. And then I had the idea to make the one that was playable. And man, I'm loving that idea. And that was complete accident. I didn't mean to do that. It's not. So in my head, I pictured a smaller platform. Whatever the dimension left to right was going to be based on just whatever size I had the most pizza boxes in. I don't eat pizza, so I got to steal all those from my roommates. Then I realized, wait, I can make this exactly 3 inches like I like, and I can do it on a 3-inch cube system, and I can make the whole thing modular, and I can get the storage, and I can get playable interiors, and man, I just ran with it. So sometimes I like getting exactly what's in my head, and sometimes I like being completely surprised by the final version.
That's like I said, I think that's one of the most useful pieces of terrain I've seen before, including the little dice boxes with the stairs and stuff. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing how the finished project turns out, because do you have anything else going on apart from the buildings, or is it just the buildings and then you're done?
I am working on the January guild build, so I've got a shrine in the works as well, and we're back to scale again. Remember I was talking about things looking right in scale with the Alcatel? I pictured in my head like the Japanese little road shrines that sit on the side of the road. But they're only like this big. They're only like a foot by like a foot and a half by a foot and a half. And in scale, that's
tiny.
And so I'm like, well, if I have a shrine like that, I got to have some place for it to go. So now I'm actually making a whole hill with a ramp up to it and some little signposts, not signposts, just path posts along the side, and a flat area where I'm going to put the shrine in, and some trees overhanging it. And then I went with woodland, and I looked up what counts as woods. Turns out jungles and forests and rainforests and jungles are both considered woodland, but I still wanted to just go with normal woodland. So mine's actually going to be deciduous, and not pine. So I've got a whole thing. So I've got a 15 by 15 thing I'm building plus tree height for a shrine that's going to be about that big.
Hi, Gwyn. Do you have any favorite way of making trees?
Yes. I have made trees in several different ways. I've even been experimenting with one recently where they have aluminum armature. But my favorite way is still Michael from that one videos. Ropes glued together with hot glue and twisted. It makes amazing looking trees to me. I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty. It gives a really interesting texture. Now, what I've been experimenting with here is toilet paper trees. That's basically
I haven't.
Toilet paper on a wireframe.
Okay, so it's so you're sort of paper macheing them?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, that's interesting. I've seen some that like that. I think DM Scotty did some like that a few years ago, but I didn't even think to do that. I didn't even think to do that. Somebody I know uses. Somebody I watch. I'm subscribed to like 200 channels. I don't know.
Yeah, same here.
Somebody I watch. He takes the toilet paper cores, cuts them lengthwise, wraps them to the size he wants them, and then hot glues them, and then uses hot glue to build up the texture on the core. That basically makes all of his trees about the same height, but he doesn't put all of the foliage on top. I'm trying to remember who it is.
I think I've seen that.
But then build like 2 or 3 little branches out and put foliage on that, and he sticks them down, and that way you can tell where the trees are, but they never get in the way of reaching in to move them any. And I thought that was pretty good, but I cannot for the life of me remember who that was. I don't know. If you're watching, remind me.
Yeah, because trees are one of those things that about millions of different ways to make them. It's always fun to find new ways. Tina says clay works too. Yes, it does. It does. Or you could also.
I have to say that if I was, the armatures that you can buy, I am not a fan of. But again, I'm building for like one-off pieces here and things like that, and I don't like those so much. But I gotta say, there's something to be said. If you're like Mel the Train Tutor and you're doing the big Burma build, I can absolutely see using armatures to make like 300 trees.
Oh yeah, I mean,
you're trying to make things at once. Yeah, there's something to be said for take it out of the package and add foliage.
Yeah, I mean, and even then, I mean, like if I think it was Luke from Geek Gaming Scenics did a video recently about dressing the armatures up, so they don't look so plasticky.
Yep, he takes the armatures and then he adds the sea foam, and then he adds copious amounts of glue to where even the sea foam is no longer brittle.
Yeah,
and,
I think it was some kind of rubber glue or something like that.
Yep, and his come out looking amazing, but he built like 8 trees in like 4 days. And I'm like, man, I got to get mine on the board a little quicker than that. Now, for foliage, I still like my method that I put together from 100 other people's. I take no credit for any of this. It's just the way I do it. I take pillow batting, not the sponge, the fiber stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Fiber fill, I think it's called, is one of the brands. And I spray it in multiple colors of green and brown. And then once that's dry, I just stretch that out and clump it up where I want it, hot glue it onto the foliage. And then I spray all that down with either spray adhesive or watered down PVA and water. Watered down water. Great cross. Then I sprinkle on the same this kind of foliage here onto it. So now I'll tell you right now, a lot of this foliage here is going to end up funky, weird colors because I have never really worked with flowers, and some of the people, including foam family members, including foam family members, a lot of the people do amazing stuff with like flower work, even like flowers on the vines and flowers on the trees and stuff. So I'm going to be doing some of that with this stuff I'm sorting right now, for sure.
Yeah, I did a few little pieces like that, but only like base highlights for miniatures. But I think that kind of color really adds a lot to a build, but for some reason I have never thought of using it that way.
So, somebody, so again, I think it was Geek Gaming again. I think he's the one I saw recently just sprinkle like pink flock and yellow flock on a field as flowers. He'd already done like the whole thing as if it was completed, and then just came by with just a light sprinkling of flock to use as flowers. Pretty sure I saw that on Geek Gaming.
It does sound like the kind of stuff it does. Because I mean, like
now I'm trying. I do like one thing about his that I just can't seem to bring myself to do. He gets everything situated and has the ground painted, and he's done, and then he puts down like his sand flocks and leaves them. He doesn't repaint them. He uses dirt-looking flocks to look like dirt.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
And I have not quite gotten to that point. When I try it, I always think that it ends up looking like it just doesn't look completed to me. I don't know, but I'm trying to get to that point because there's no doubt his stuff comes out looking amazing. So
I think it's mostly in the preparation, because he doesn't just use. I think he just prepares the stuff beforehand, filters, sieves it out. And I think I remember I had mentioned that 2 tips. One of them was don't glue anything unless you absolutely have to.
Right.
Like if you're going to put sculptor mode or stuff on something, forget the glue, just pin it together and then let the sculptor mold sort it out. And don't paint anything you don't need to paint.
Yep.
So I guess it's mostly in the preparation of the materials.
Speaking of painting, there's a thing I've noticed like 3 different people do this week in videos I've watched, and it just baffles me. I see people painting terrain, and I mean like whole walls of stone in Games Workshop paints and the Citadel paints, and I'm like, you have a foam wall, you have a $1.50 worth of wall with $8 worth of paint on it. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's the kind of lesson most wargamers learn early on. You do not paint your terrain with miniature paints.
And I'm like, go to Walmart and get the, if you get the 70% off coupon at Michael's, which is an art store here in America, if you get the 70% off coupon, you can get paint for 4 ounces, which is twice what a pot of Games Workshop is, for like 30 cents. If you're spending 7.5 cents an ounce rather than $4 an ounce, man, what are you doing? Dropping Games Workshop paint on, don't paint your surface of your road with Citadel. Just don't. Or Vallejo or Army Painter. Just don't. They're great. They're awesome paints.
There are some paints for miniatures. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing is that
they flow better. They flow better and they have better pigments and all that. Yeah, for a reason, and that reason is not painting the wall. If you go to the hardware store, they have stuff called wall paint. You can buy it in gallons for $15.
That's something I want to try eventually. It's mostly for undercoating and things, like latex paint or stuff like that. But for example,
you've watched you've seen my videos when I use my gray and my brown, what I call my boom, my undercoat. Those are both came from gallons of paint from the hardware store.
Nice.
So I learned that trick from. I like to give credit where credit's due. I learned that trick from Tabletop Oddity. No, he has like 4 channels. What was Jay's channel that I first saw him? Terrain Made Easy.
Terrain Made Easy. Okay, I looked up.
So I don't think he puts any more videos out on that, but the channel's still up, and he's got several other channels. So, but I learned that from him. He's like, just go to the hardware store and get a pint of paint. I'm like, all right.
Even other stuff, like for example, for undercoats and things, I mostly use spray paints from the hardware store anyway. Same with varnishes and stuff like that.
Yep.
Because I mean, a kind of Citadel primer, I don't know how much it is today, but back in the day it used to be pretty expensive.
Yeah, the paint that I used, the dark gray that I got for the stuff that I use for most of my stonework undercoat was, I think, $16 a gallon, and I could get it any color I want it. And I don't like black. Nothing in nature is black, so I don't ever actually undercoat anything in black. Just really, really dark gray, because shadow isn't black; it's gray. So I got the darkest gray I could find, and was like, "Great, this is awesome." And then I mixed it half with PVA and went, "Oh." It got really light, and then I was like, the PVA will turn clear when it dries. It still comes out lighter. So if you're wanting dark, just get the black and mix it with PVA. It comes out dark gray anyway.
Okay,
but
so it doesn't go back to its original color after this?
No, and you can notice that a lot in Jeremy's stuff on Blackmagic Craft. If you see the scene where right before he never really shows it with the black on it. He shows putting the black on it, and then he shows putting the next color on. But if you look at the color it is, look where he's not painting, where it hasn't been painted yet, it's never really dark black. It never quite darkens back up again, whether you're using Mod Podge or straight PVA.
Yeah, so I never actually paid attention to it, because I mean, even with when I undercoat stuff in PVA and black paint, I never really paid attention to it. It's more, okay, it's dry, spray paint, keep going. So yeah, good to know. Anyway, we've come up on the hour here, so I guess we'll be wrapping up soon.
All right.
Thanks for everything.
To those of you who I've offended today, join the club. And, I hope I haven't ticked off too many people lately.
It was great talking to you, man. And if you haven't done so already, drop by at Campaign Terrain. There's a link in the video description. And check out his videos. Thanks again, Cross.
Yes, please do. So much. Have a great one.
Thanks, and see you, everyone.